Have you ever felt torn between standing firm in your convictions and staying open to the emotions of those around you? That push and pull between strength and softness, resilience and warmth, is one of the most human struggles we face. We want to be unshakable, yet we don't want to become cold. We crave inner fortitude, but not at the cost of our empathy. What if I told you there's an ancient philosophy that doesn't force you to choose? Stoicism, often misunderstood as emotionless endurance, actually offers a profound blueprint for building what Marcus Aurelius called an inner fortress, a place of unbreakable resolve that doesn't wall out compassion, but instead makes space for it. Picture this: a Roman emperor bearing the weight of an empire, writing in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet the same man who penned those words also spoke of kindness as a duty, of seeing humanity as a single community. This is the heart of Stoic wisdom, not suppressing emotion, but mastering it. Not shutting out the world, but engaging with it from a place of unshakable clarity. Imagine what your life would look like if you could face chaos with calm, setbacks with steadiness, and still meet others with genuine understanding. That's the balance we're exploring today: how to cultivate steel in your spine without losing the softness in your heart. This video isn't just about theories, it's about transformation. We'll dive into the Stoic practices that help you build resilience without detachment, how to respond to life's blows with grace while staying connected to those around you. You'll discover why the Stoics saw empathy not as a weakness but as a strength, and how their tools, from journaling to reflective questioning, can help you navigate modern challenges with ancient wisdom. Whether you're facing personal trials, professional pressures, or simply the daily grind, these principles can turn your inner turmoil into unshakable peace. So let's begin this journey, not just to endure life, but to live it fully, fiercely, and with an open heart. The Stoic inner fortress isn't about building walls to keep the world out, it's about fortifying your mind so you can engage with life on your own terms. Picture it like the roots of an ancient oak, deep enough to withstand storms, yet flexible enough to bend without breaking. At its core, this mental stronghold rests on two pillars: self-control and perspective. The Stoics didn't see self-control as repression. They saw it as clarity, the ability to choose your response rather than being hijacked by impulses, and perspective. That's the lens that turns obstacles into stepping stones. Epictetus, born a slave and later one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, put it bluntly: "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." For him, every challenge was a chance to exercise what he called the discipline of desire, training yourself to want only what aligns with your principles, not what the world dangles in front of you. Think about the last time frustration threatened to derail your day. Maybe a project collapsed or someone's criticism stung. In that moment, the Stoic question isn't, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What can I do with this?" That shift from victim to architect is the essence of the inner fortress. Marcus Aurelius left us a compass for these moments. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. It's a reminder that while we can't control the chaos around us, we can always control where we stand within it. Now here's where modern life tests us. We're told resilience means gritting our teeth, while empathy means opening our hearts, but Stoicism rejects that false choice. When Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do," he wasn't advocating cold detachment. He was describing intentionality, the space between stimulus and response where our humanity lies. So let me ask you, when have you felt that tension between holding your ground and holding space for others? Maybe during a tough conversation where you bit your tongue to keep peace, or when you had to make an unpopular but principled decision. Those moments aren't contradictions, they're the training ground for unshakable resolve paired with deep connection. The beauty of this philosophy, it doesn't demand perfection. Even the Stoics stumbled. Seneca wrote about his own struggles with anger. Marcus Aurelius confessed to wrestling with pride. Their journals weren't victory laps, they were training logs. That's the real work of the inner fortress, not achieving some unfeeling ideal, but returning again and again to that center where strength and sensitivity coexist. Because true resilience isn't armor that blocks out life. It's the quiet certainty that you can face whatever comes without losing yourself in the storm. One of the most powerful tools in building unshakable resolve is what the Stoics called cognitive detachment, the art of witnessing your emotions without letting them dictate your actions. This isn't about shutting down feelings or pretending they don't exist. It's about creating a small but critical gap between what you feel and how you respond. Seneca, the philosopher who counseled emperors, put it perfectly: we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. His point, our raw emotions aren't the problem. It's the stories we attach to them that spiral into suffering. Take a moment to imagine this in action. You're at work and a colleague critiques your project in front of the team. Your face flushes, your pulse quickens. That's natural. But here's where Stoic detachment changes the game. Instead of reacting defensively or swallowing resentment, you pause. You observe the heat of embarrassment without letting it steer your tongue. You might even ask yourself, is this feedback useful? Is my reaction proportional? That space between the sting and your response is where empathy thrives. Because when you're not hijacked by emotion, you can actually hear the other person. Maybe their critique was poorly delivered, but perhaps there's a kernel of truth to refine your work. This is the balance, feeling fully but choosing wisely. The modern myth is that strength means either bulldozing through emotions or being overwhelmed by them. The Stoics rejected both extremes. Think of detachment like watching storm clouds pass. You acknowledge the darkness without becoming the storm. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, reminding himself, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. He wasn't advocating indifference. He was training to engage with the world from a place of clarity, not chaos. Now contrast this with emotional suppression, where we bottle up or ignore feelings until they erupt. Suppression is like sitting on a beach ball underwater. It takes constant effort and eventually it rockets back with force. Detachment, though, that's standing on the shore, seeing the waves without being swept away. It's how a doctor can remain composed during an emergency yet still care deeply for the patient, or how a parent can set boundaries with a child without shutting down their own compassion. Here's the subtle brilliance of this practice. It doesn't just protect your peace, it preserves your ability to connect. When you're not drowning in your own reactions, you have the bandwidth to truly listen, to offer patience instead of impatience, understanding instead of judgment. Seneca wrote, "A sword never kills anybody, it's a tool in the killer's hand." Your emotions are the same, neutral until you wield them. Master that space between feeling and action, and you'll find something extraordinary, a resolve that's both unbreakable and deeply human. At the heart of Stoic resilience lies a simple but revolutionary idea, the dichotomy of control. Epictetus, the philosopher who turned adversity into wisdom, framed it like this: some things are within our power while others are not. Sounds obvious, right? But here's where it gets profound. Most of our inner turmoil comes from exhausting ourselves trying to command the uncontrollable other people's opinions, past mistakes, even the weather, while neglecting the one thing we truly govern, our own judgments and actions. Think about the last time you lost sleep over a problem. Maybe it was a friend's disapproval or a delayed flight. Now ask yourself, was that thing ever truly yours to decide? The Stoics recognized this friction the way we grind ourselves down trying to move immovable objects. But here's the twist. Letting go of what you can't control doesn't mean ceasing to care. It means redirecting that energy where it matters. Imagine a gardener who spends hours yelling at the sky for rain instead of tending the soil. The Stoic approach. Plant seeds, water what you can, and accept the rest without resentment. That's how you build resolve without becoming rigid, by focusing your effort where it actually grows something. Let's make this practical. Grab a sheet of paper and draw 2 columns. Label one within my control, the other beyond my control. Now list your current stressors: traffic, a family disagreement, a work deadline. Sorting them forces a revelation: how much mental real estate we lease to things that don't belong to us. The neighbor's loud music, column 2, your irritation about it. Column 1, that's the pivot point, recognizing that while we can't always shape circumstances, we can always shape our relationship to them. This exercise isn't about passivity, it's about precision. Consider a nurse in an overcrowded hospital. She can't single-handedly fix staffing shortages, but she can control her presence with each patient. That's the empathy resolve balance in action, accepting limits without abandoning compassion. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily, ruling an empire while reminding himself, you don't have to turn this into something, it doesn't have to upset you. Now reflect, what's one thing you've wrongly tried to command lately? A loved one's life choices, the pace of your career. Notice how that struggle felt like gripping a fistful of water. The tighter you held, the more slipped through. The Stoic invitation isn't to stop caring, but to care smarter. Because when you stop wrestling with the unchangeable, you free up strength to change what you can, starting with yourself. That's the secret Epictetus gifted us. True power isn't controlling the world. It's mastering your corner of it, tenderly but unshakably, come what may. There's a phrase the Stoics whispered like a secret weapon against life's chaos. Amor Fati, love of fate. Not just enduring what happens, but embracing it. Not just accepting setbacks, but seeing them as necessary threads in the tapestry of your life. Nietzsche, centuries later, would echo this ancient wisdom with his own fiery twist. My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Imagine that, not resisting the past or grasping for a different future, but loving the raw material of your life exactly as it is. Now picture Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, steering Rome through war, betrayal, and a devastating plague. While others panicked, he wrote in his journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." That's amor fati in motion. He didn't waste energy cursing the plague. He focused on organizing relief efforts, comforting the grieving, and finding meaning in the crisis. His resilience wasn't denial. It was a deep, almost revolutionary yes to reality. Here's the radical truth this practice reveals. Every obstacle carries hidden leverage. A failed project, it's data for your next attempt. A painful breakup, space for a truer connection to grow. Even suffering becomes a kind of fuel when you stop fighting its existence and start asking, what can this teach me? The Stoics didn't preach passive resignation. They championed active engagement with life as it unfolds. So let's bring this home. Think of a recent setback, a missed opportunity, a plan gone awry. Now ask yourself, what if this isn't a detour but part of the path? What if, like Marcus in the plague, you could look at the very thing that frustrates you and say, this too belongs? That shift from resistance to curiosity doesn't erase the pain, but it does transform your relationship to it. Suddenly, you're not a victim of circumstance, you're a student of it. This is where Stoicism and Nietzsche meet in brilliant harmony. Both understood that loving fate isn't about Pollyanna optimism. It's about recognizing that life's friction polishes us into who we're meant to be. The oak tree doesn't resent the wind that bends it. That resistance is what makes its roots grip tighter. So next time life hands you an unexpected challenge, try whispering Amor Fati. See it not as a wall, but as a doorway, one that leads, however strangely, to a version of yourself you couldn't have become any other way. Now let's talk about a Stoic exercise so powerful it could rewrite your relationship with fear. Premeditatio Malorum, the Premeditation of Evils. Far from morbid pessimism, this practice is about disarmament. By mentally rehearsing life's worst-case scenarios before they happen, you strip them of their power to shock or paralyze you. Seneca, who faced exile and political turmoil, put it bluntly: the man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. Think of it like fire drills. We don't practice them because we want buildings to burn, but because preparation turns panic into purposeful action. Here's how it works in real life. Imagine you're about to give a major presentation. Your palms sweat, your stomach churns. Classic fear of the unknown. Now apply Premeditatio Malorum. What if the projector fails? You've already packed a printed handout. What if you blank on your opening line? You've practiced pausing, sipping water, and restarting. What if the audience looks bored? You've prepared questions to re-engage them. Suddenly, the monster under the bed has a blueprint, and you've got a flashlight. This isn't about expecting the worst, it's about refusing to let the worst surprise you. Contrast this with toxic positivity, that well-meaning but hollow chant of "just think happy thoughts." The Stoics would call that avoidance. Real courage isn't pretending storms won't come, it's knowing you've already weathered them in your mind. Seneca saw this clearly. He suffers more than necessary who suffers before it's necessary. By mentally walking through adversity now, you pay the emotional cost upfront, so when reality arrives, you're not paying interest on dread. Let's ground this in something universal: rejection. Whether it's a job application, a romantic gesture, or a creative pitch, we all fear that no. Now imagine applying Premeditatio Malorum. Before hitting send, you ask, what if they say no? Then I'll revise and reapply elsewhere. What if they ignore me? Then I'll follow up or move on. What if they criticize my work? Then I'll separate useful feedback from noise. Suddenly, rejection shifts from a cliff's edge to a detour sign. Unpleasant, but not catastrophic. Here's the profound side effect no one mentions. This practice doesn't just harden you, it softens you too. When you've made peace with life's rougher possibilities, you stop projecting your anxieties onto others. That co-worker who snapped at you, maybe they're rehearsing their own disasters. The stranger who seemed cold, perhaps they're bracing for imagined blows. Premeditatio Malorum becomes a bridge to empathy, because you recognize everyone's fighting battles they've pre-simulated in their minds. So try this today. Pick one challenge you've been avoiding or fearing. It could be a difficult conversation, a career risk, even a medical checkup. Now close your eyes and walk through the worst plausible outcome, not to dwell on it, but to defang it. Ask yourself, how would I respond? What tools do I have? Who could I lean on? That's the Stoic secret. Rehearsal turns dread into readiness, and readiness into unshakable calm. Because the goal isn't to predict the future, it's to prove to yourself that no matter what it brings, you've already stood tall in the face of it. Here's where Stoic philosophy shatters its biggest stereotype: that unshakable resolve means emotional detachment. Nothing could be further from the truth. Consider Hierocles, a Stoic thinker who taught that wisdom isn't about walling yourself off, but about widening your circles of concern. He envisioned empathy as concentric rings, at the center yourself, then family, friends, community, and ultimately all humanity. The work of the wise, he argued, is to draw those outer circles inward, to treat strangers as neighbors and neighbors as kin. That's not weakness, it's the ultimate strength, the ability to care deeply without being shattered by what you care about. Take modern leadership as an example. The most resilient teams aren't led by emotionless drill sergeants, but by those who pair clear boundaries with genuine understanding. A manager practicing Stoic empathy might say, "I see how frustrating this setback is. Let's focus on what we control." That's hierarchical circles in action, acknowledging the emotion while guiding attention to constructive action. Marcus Aurelius modeled this daily, reminding himself in his journal, "What injures the hive injures the bee." He didn't suppress his concern for others, he anchored it in a broader perspective. Now think about your own life, who needs both your strength and your understanding right now. Maybe it's a friend navigating a crisis who requires your steady presence more than your solutions, or a child testing boundaries who needs firmness wrapped in patience. Even in conflict, Stoic empathy asks, how can I hold my ground without hardening my heart? The answer often lies in that delicate balance between compassion and clarity, listening fully before responding, separating the person from the problem, refusing to let temporary emotions dictate lasting decisions. This is why the Stoics saw empathy as discipline in disguise. It's easy to either absorb others' pain until you drown in it or shut it out entirely. The harder, braver path. To stand beside someone in their storm without mistaking it for your own. Seneca captured this when he wrote, "We should show humanity in listening to others' sorrows, yet cautioned against infecting ourselves with them." Like a lighthouse firm in its foundation, yet casting light for those tossed by waves. So the next time you face a situation demanding both resolve and tenderness, remember, true strength isn't measured by how much you can endure alone, but by how steadfastly you can support others without losing your footing. That's the Stoic secret, building an inner fortress with doors open wide enough to let others in, yet walls strong enough to keep chaos out. Marcus Aurelius faced more in a single year than most do in a lifetime: plagues that emptied cities, betrayals from trusted advisors, wars that stretched Rome's limits. Yet his private writings reveal a startling perspective. The obstacle is the way, not a barrier to avoid, but a path to walk, not misfortune, but raw material for greatness. Consider his nightly ritual, reviewing the day's challenges and asking, how did this difficulty serve my growth? That simple question transforms suffering from enemy to teacher. History brims with those who embodied this principle. Take Thomas Edison, whose laboratory burned to the ground at 67, destroying years of research. Watching the flames, he told his son, "There's great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." Within weeks, he was working on inventions that would shape the 20th century. Notice what Edison didn't do. He didn't deny the loss or pretend it didn't hurt. He stood in the ashes and asked, what now becomes possible? That's the Stoic shift. When life hands you rubble, you build with it. Now bring this home. What's weighing on you today? A strained relationship, financial pressure, a dream that seems out of reach? Try this reframe. If this challenge were custom designed to strengthen a specific muscle in your character, what would that muscle be? Patience, courage, creativity. The Stoics called this ascesis, the deliberate use of hardship as training. Like a blacksmith tempering steel, they understood that resistance isn't the opposite of growth. It's the very thing that makes growth possible. Epictetus, who endured slavery before becoming a philosopher, left us this compass. difficulties show men what they are. In other words, adversity doesn't define you, it reveals you. That argument with your partner, it's showing you where your communication needs honing. The project that failed, it's highlighting where your preparation or adaptability fell short. Even physical pain can become a masterclass in patience and presence. The key is to stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this preparing me for?" Here's the paradox few talk about. The people who have weathered the greatest storms often develop the deepest capacity for joy. Why? Because hardship scrubs away the trivial. It forces you to distinguish between what matters and what merely glitters. The Roman poet Virgil hinted at this when he wrote, "They can because they think they can." That's the alchemy of the Stoic mindset, turning leaden obstacles into golden resilience. Your current struggle isn't blocking your path, it's sculpting the person who can walk the path with unshakable strength. So tonight, borrow Marcus Aurelius' question, how did today's difficulty serve you? The answer might just reveal the hidden curriculum of your life. Cleans, the second leader of the Stoic school, left us a principle that cuts to the core of purposeful living. Lead me, Zeus, along the path you've ordained, for I will follow unhesitatingly. But if I turn resistant, I'll follow anyway, wretched though I may be. At first glance, it sounds like surrender, but look closer. It's actually a masterclass in disciplined action. The key lies in that word, unhesitatingly. This isn't passive acceptance, it's active cooperation with reality, like a sailor adjusting sails to the wind rather than cursing it. Picture an oak tree in a storm. Its roots grip the earth, unwavering in purpose, to stand tall, to grow, to shelter. Yet its branches bend and sway, allowing the wind to pass through without snapping. That's the Stoic discipline of action in nature's own language, firm in intention, flexible in method. Cleans wasn't advising aimless drifting. He was teaching the art of moving with life's currents while staying true to your course. Now consider where we often go wrong. How many times have you bulldozed toward a goal, exhausting yourself against immovable obstacles? Maybe you've strained to control a partner's behavior, forced a career timeline, or white-knuckled a project that needed to evolve. The Stoics called this fighting reality, a sure path to frustration. Contrast this with the craftsman shaping wood. He doesn't rage against the grain, he works with it, guiding his tools along the natural lines of the material. That's the sweet spot where effort meets adaptability. Here's the profound twist. Aligning with nature doesn't mean lowering your standards. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What stands in the way becomes the way," he was urging us to see obstacles as redirections, not roadblocks. Think of a river encountering a boulder. It doesn't stop flowing, it finds new channels. That's disciplined action in practice. A musician whose hands are injured doesn't abandon music, she composes. An athlete sidelined by injury coaches. The goal remains expression, excellence, contribution, but the form adapts. So let's make this personal. Where in your life are you straining against the grain? Maybe you're forcing a relationship dynamic that needs space or clinging to an outdated version of success. The Stoic question isn't, "How do I make this happen?" but "What is reality inviting me to do differently?" That shift from forcing to flowing isn't about giving up, it's about leveling up. Like a tree bending in wind, you learn to hold your ground while dancing with forces beyond your control. Clean's wisdom reminds us that nature's intelligence operates in every circumstance, even the difficult ones. Your job isn't to dictate every outcome, but to discern the difference between what's yours to shape and what's yours to accept. When you act with that clarity, something remarkable happens. Effort stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like partnership. You become less a warrior against life and more a collaborator with it, rooted in purpose, yet supple enough to grow through every season. One of the most transformative habits Marcus Aurelius left us wasn't in his public speeches or imperial decrees. It was in the private pages of his journal. Those weathered scrolls written by candlelight became his daily dialogue with wisdom. When you arise in the morning, he reminded himself, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. Then at night he'd reflect, what did I do wrong? What did I do right? What remains undone? This simple rhythm, bookending each day with purposeful reflection, wasn't just self-improvement. It was the whetstone that sharpened his resilience and empathy in equal measure. Imagine having a tool that could distill chaos into clarity, turning emotional whirlwinds into actionable insights. That's what Stoic journaling offers. A structured space where your thoughts stop racing and start making sense. The format couldn't be simpler. Each morning, ask, what potential challenges await today? How can I meet them with wisdom? Each evening, review, what actually tested me? Did I respond as my best self? These prompts aren't about self-judgment, they're about calibration. Like a navigator adjusting course by the stars, you're aligning your actions with your principles. Consider how this plays out in modern life. A teacher might journal, today Jason disrupted class again. I felt frustration rise, but instead of snapping, I pulled him aside and asked what was wrong. That reflection does two things. It acknowledges the emotional trigger while celebrating the chosen response. Or a nurse might write, lost a patient this afternoon. Grieved deeply but channeled that sorrow into comforting the family. See the pattern. The journal becomes a mirror that doesn't flatter or condemn. It simply shows you where your strength held firm and where your compassion found its footing. Here's why this practice outlasted empires. It builds what psychologists now call metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking. When you externalize your reactions on paper, you're no longer drowning in them, you're studying them from the shore. Seneca described this as walking yourself back through the day's events. Did that argument with your partner stem from the issue at hand, or from your own hunger or fatigue? Did you avoid speaking up in the meeting because of prudence or fear? The ink reveals what the heat of the moment obscures. For the next 7 days, try this experiment. Keep 2 columns, one for external events, my flight was cancelled, another for your internal response, I cursed at the agent, then apologized. Over time, you'll spot patterns. Perhaps that fatigue magnifies small irritations, or that preparation softens anxiety. Like Marcus reviewing his day under lamplight, you're not just logging events, you're uncovering the architecture of your own resilience. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Because when you see your reactions clearly, you gain something priceless, the freedom to choose them. There's a razor-thin gap between stimulus and response, fractions of a second, where the entire course of an interaction can pivot. Epictetus pinpointed this critical space when he said, between stimulus and response there is a pause, and in that pause lies our power. The Stoics didn't just preach this idea, they weaponized it. Imagine standing at a crossroads where one path leads to escalation, the other to clarity. That split-second decision point is where unshakable resolve is forged. Consider road rage, a modern crucible for testing this principle. Your lane gets cut off, adrenaline spikes, and your foot hovers near the horn. In that flash, the ancient Stoic question isn't, how dare they? But what's worth my energy? The difference between laying on the horn and taking a breath isn't weakness, it's tactical restraint. You're not letting the other driver off the hook, you're refusing to let them hijack your peace. Seneca, who faced daily provocations in Nero's court, trained himself to treat such moments like a doctor diagnosing a fever, observing the heat without being burned by it. Now bring this closer to home. Think of the last time a colleague's email rubbed you the wrong way or a family member pushed a sensitive button. replay that moment with a 10-second pause inserted. What changes? Maybe you catch the urge to fire off a sarcastic reply and instead draft 3 bullet points of constructive feedback. Perhaps you notice your jaw clenching and choose to walk around the block before continuing the conversation. That pause isn't passive, it's the ultimate power move. Like a chess player resisting the temptation to grab a pawn only to lose the queen, you're playing the long game with your emotions. The brilliance of this practice lies in its simplicity. No special equipment, no elaborate rituals, just the discipline to create a buffer between what happens and what happens next. Marcus Aurelius modeled this during military campaigns, writing, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That's the pause principle in its purest form, the refusal to let external events dictate internal states. When someone insults you and you don't feel insulted, they've lost leverage over you. Here's what modern neuroscience confirms. The 10-second rule works because it bypasses the amygdala hijacker, that primal flood of fight or flight chemicals. By delaying reaction, you engage the prefrontal cortex, where reason and empathy collaborate. Picture 2 construction workers. One slams a nail in one furious blow, often bending it. The other taps steadily, guiding it true. Your responses are those nails. Force isn't precision, so try this today. Identify your trigger points. Maybe it's interruptions during meetings or your teen's eye rolls. Then rehearse the pause, visualize the provocation, then literally count 10 breaths. You're not suppressing emotion, you're giving your wiser self time to report for duty. Because in that silence, something extraordinary happens. You stop being a reactor and start being an architect, crafting responses that fortify your resolve without abandoning your humanity. The Stoics had a practice that might sound jarring at first, Memento Mori, the meditation on mortality. But this wasn't about morbidity or fear, it was a lens to sharpen life's focus. Picture holding an hourglass where the sand represents your days. The grains keep falling whether you watch them or not. Memento Mori is simply turning your attention to that flow, not to panic but to clarify. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, put it bluntly, "You act like mortals in all that you fear and like immortals in all that you desire." His point. We waste so much time postponing what matters, assuming we'll get to it later, while death quietly reminds us, later isn't promised. Consider how differently we'd live if we treated time like a currency we can't earn back. A CEO facing a terminal diagnosis might drop pointless meetings to mentor their successor. A parent might swap scrolling on their phone for bedtime stories. These aren't tragic realizations, they're liberating ones. The Stoics saw mortality not as a shadow, but as a spotlight illuminating what's truly worth our limited hours. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That's the unexpected gift of Memento Mori, urgency without anxiety, purpose without pressure. Now let's dismantle the biggest misunderstanding, that reflecting on death is morbid. The opposite is true. Those who have faced mortality often describe a paradoxical clarity. The trivial falls away, the essential shines. Think of a near-miss car accident where suddenly petty grudges vanish and you're left wanting only to hug your family. The Stoics aim to harness that clarity before crisis strikes. Seneca observed, "Life is long if you know how to use it." His letters reveal a man obsessed not with counting years, but with making years count. Here's the practice in action. Each morning, ask, "If this were my last day, would I still do what I've planned?" Not to incite drastic change, but to audit your choices. Would you still attend that meeting, or would you write the letter you've been putting off? Would you still criticize your partner's habits, or would you hold them a little longer? This isn't about living recklessly, but living aligned. Try this today. pick one interaction you'll have, maybe a call with a parent or a coffee with a friend. Now imagine it's your final conversation with them. Notice how your attention sharpens, how your distractions fade. That's memento mori at work, not stealing joy, but deepening it. Because when you stop pretending time is infinite, you start spending it like the precious resource it is. The sand keeps falling, yes, but that's what makes the hourglass beautiful. Every grain is a chance to choose. The Stoics had a word for the invisible threads that bind us: sympatheia, the profound understanding that every life is interwoven, like strands in a vast cosmic tapestry. Marcus Aurelius captured this perfectly when he wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." He wasn't speaking metaphorically, he was describing a fundamental truth of existence. Picture an ancient olive grove where the roots of separate trees intertwine underground, sharing nutrients and shoring one another up against storms. That's sympatheia in action, individual yet inseparable, sovereign yet sustained by connection. Now fast forward to today, when a neighbor loses their job and you drop off a meal, or when a stranger holds the door with a tired smile, you're enacting this same Stoic principle. Modern research even confirms it. Studies show communities with strong social bonds recover faster from disasters, raise healthier children, and even live longer. The Stoics would nod knowingly. They saw empathy not as softness but as the ultimate pragmatism. Epictetus, who knew the sting of isolation as a slave, later taught that no one flourishes alone. We're born for cooperation, like feet, like hands, like eyelids. Here's where it gets radical. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in Rome, routinely reminded himself, "I am a limb of the whole, not the head, not the heart, just one part of a greater body." That humility fueled his leadership. Instead of hoarding wealth, he funded schools and fed the poor during plagues. He grasped what too many forget. Strength isn't measured by how much you accumulate, but by how widely you distribute it. Consider the paradox of our hyper-connected age. We've never had more ways to link up, yet loneliness epidemics surge. The fix isn't more followers or faster Wi-Fi. It's the Stoic practice of active sympatheia. Not just feeling connected, but fortifying those connections with deliberate action. Like a gardener tending vines, you don't just appreciate the web of life, you nurture your corner of it. So here's your challenge. This week, pick one strand in your web to strengthen. Maybe it's the barista who serves your coffee every morning. Learn their name. Perhaps it's the colleague who's been quiet lately. Ask what they're working on. Even something as simple as letting a car merge in traffic with a wave becomes Stoic training. Because every time you recognize your place in the whole, you're not just building community. You're rehearsing the ancient truth that to be unbreakable, we must first be united. The oak stands tall, but the forest weathers the storm. Imagine your mind is like a cup of water. Fill it too little, and you're left thirsty. Pour too much, and it spills over. That's the essence of temperance, the Stoic virtue that's often misunderstood as austerity or denial. But the ancient teachers like Musonius Rufus saw it differently. Self-mastery isn't about rejecting pleasure, it's about not being enslaved by it. Temperance is the art of finding the middle path where resilience isn't drained by excess or eroded by deprivation. Take modern work culture as an example. On one end, there's the grind mentality, pushing until exhaustion wears you down like a blade gone dull. On the other, there's complacency, avoiding effort until skills atrophy. Neither extreme fosters strength. The Stoic approach: work diligently, then rest deliberately. Like a farmer who knows when to till the soil and when to let it lie fallow, temperance recognizes that endurance isn't built through constant strain, but through rhythmic cycles of exertion and recovery. Now apply this to your daily life. That strict diet leaving you fixated on cravings, that's not discipline, it's a setup for backlash. the Stoics would say, enjoy the meal but don't let the meal own you. Musonius Rufus, who taught philosophy while exiled to a barren island, insisted even hardship could be met with equilibrium. One who eats only what's necessary does so with greater pleasure than one who seeks luxury. His point, temperance heightens appreciation, it doesn't diminish it. Here's where modern science echoes ancient wisdom. Research shows willpower operates like a muscle overuse leads to fatigue, while balanced training increases capacity. A musician doesn't practice 12 hours straight. They break sessions into focused intervals. Similarly, emotional resilience thrives on moderation. Ever noticed how after a day of reactive emotions, outbursts, or suppression, you feel drained? Temperance offers a third way: feel fully but respond thoughtfully. So let's get practical. Identify one area where imbalance is costing you energy. Maybe it's screen time that bleeds into sleep, or workouts so intense they leave you injured. Now ask, how could the Stoic virtue of temperance recalibrate this? Not by cutting out joy, but by removing the friction of excess. Like a sculptor chiseling away only what obscures the form within, temperance reveals your natural capacity for steadiness. The goal isn't to live narrowly, but to live freely, unshackled from the pendulum swing between too much and too little. Because when you master the art of enough, you discover something profound. True resilience isn't rigid. It bends without breaking, enjoys without clinging, and stands firm without growing brittle. That's the gift of temperance, not less life, but more presence in every moment you're given. History remembers Cato the Younger as the unyielding Stoic who chose death over surrendering his principles to Julius Caesar. But there's another side to his story, one often overshadowed by his legendary defiance. After a brutal civil war battle, Cato's forces captured enemy soldiers. His officers urged execution, but Cato intervened. Mercy, he declared, is the true mark of a victor. He freed them with provisions, a move so unexpected it stunned both allies and foes. That's the Stoic ideal in action: strength that doesn't calcify into cruelty, resolve that leaves room for humanity. Then there's Portia Catanis, Cato's daughter, who embodied the same balance. When her husband Brutus conspired against Caesar, she didn't weep or plead. She proved her fortitude by silently stabbing her own thigh to show she could bear secrets and pain. Yet this same woman was renowned for sheltering persecuted families during proscriptions, risking her life to show kindness in an era of bloodshed. These weren't contradictions to the Stoics. They were the highest expression of their philosophy, the sword and the olive branch held in the same steady hand. What makes these figures so compelling isn't just their courage, but their capacity to hold opposites in tension. Think of a blacksmith forging a blade. The metal must be both heated and hammered, flexible enough to shape yet hard enough to hold an edge. That's the alchemy Cato and Portia mastered: rigidity in purpose, suppleness in spirit. Even Seneca, who served the tyrannical Nero, showed this duality. He amassed wealth while writing that the wise man is content with little, a paradox he owned unflinchingly. His life reminds us that role models needn't be perfect, just progress. Now consider your own life. Who models this blend for you? Maybe it's a grandparent who stood firm in their values yet always made space at the table for estranged family. Or a teacher who disciplined with one hand and lifted up with the other. Even fictional characters, Count Atticus Finch's quiet resolve in To Kill a Mockingbird, or Mr. Rogers' gentle strength. The key is recognizing that these examples aren't exceptions to resilience, they're its finest expressions. Here's an exercise straight from the Stoic playbook. Tonight, journal about someone historical or personal who embodies this balance. Not just what they endured, but how they softened suffering for others. Then ask, where can I mirror that today? Not through grand gestures, but in the small moments holding a boundary with a colleague while still hearing their frustration, or standing by a decision while leaving the door open for dialogue. Because the truest test of resolve isn't how much you can withstand, but how much you can withstand while keeping your humanity intact. That's the legacy Cotto and Portia left us, not just how to be unbreakable, but how to remain unmistakably human while doing so. Marcus Aurelius had a secret weapon against life's overwhelming moments, a mental exercise so simple yet profound he called it the view from above. Picture this: you're standing on a hill at night, looking down at a village where tiny lights flicker in windows. Each glow represents someone's joy, someone's grief, someone's struggle. Now pull the camera back further, see the entire country, then the continent, then the blue curve of Earth hanging in space. Suddenly, that argument with your boss or the unpaid bill doesn't vanish. It just finds its proper scale against the vastness of existence. That's the Stoic superpower, not dismissing your problems but contextualizing them. This practice isn't about escapism, it's about precision. When we're drowning in stress, our minds distort reality like a funhouse mirror, making molehills look like mountains. The view from above corrects that lens. Imagine a project deadline looming. At ground level, it feels like a tidal wave, but from 10,000 feet, it's one task among millions happening this second. The Stoics weren't saying your challenges don't matter, they were teaching you how to stop being crushed by their weight. Epictetus hinted at this when he said, "Man is disturbed not by things, but by the views he takes of them." Try it right now with something nagging at you. Close your eyes and visualize zooming out first from your room, then your neighborhood, further until you see the patchwork of farmland and cities, clouds swirling over oceans. Notice what happens to that tightness in your chest. Does the problem disappear? No. But does it dominate the entire picture anymore? Unlikely. That's the magic of cosmic perspective. It doesn't erase struggles, it fences them in. History's great minds stumbled upon this same truth independently. The astronaut Frank Borman, orbiting the moon during Apollo 8, radioed back not tales of technical triumph, but awe at Earth's fragility, a grand oasis in the void. Centuries earlier, the philosopher Boethius, imprisoned and awaiting execution, wrote of imagining himself soaring above his cell to find peace. These weren't flights of fancy, they were survival tools. When life pins you down, sometimes the bravest move is to rise above it, not literally, but mentally. Here's how to make this practical. Next time stress hits, a traffic jam, a medical scare, a family rift, pause and ask, how will this feel in 10 years? Or from space, you're not minimizing the issue, you're adding reference points. Like a sailor reading stars to navigate, you're using perspective to steer through choppy waters. Marcus Aurelius left us the perfect prompt for these moments. Think of the substance of the whole. Think of the eternity of time. Think of the changeability of each thing. 3 sentences that can shrink any monster back to its true size. The real test comes when emotions run high. Picture a heated argument where every word feels like a dagger. Now imagine watching that same scene from a balcony above. The words don't change, but their power over you does. This is why the Stoics paired the view from above with another practice, sympatheia, that web of connection we explored earlier. Together, they form a double lens. One zooms out to reveal scale, the other zooms in to reveal shared humanity. Because true perspective isn't cold detachment, it's seeing clearly enough to act wisely. So tonight, before sleep, try this. Recall one current worry, then mentally place it on a timeline of your life, then Earth's history, then the cosmos. Does it still demand the same emotional real estate? Often, you'll find the weight wasn't in the thing itself, but in the shadow it cast when you stood too close. That's the gift Marcus Aurelius offers us, not a way to escape life's storms, but to finally see them for what they are, passing weather in an endless sky. The Stoics practiced something that might seem counterintuitive at first glance. They called it Premeditatio Malorum, the premeditation of evils. But here's the twist: it wasn't about dwelling on doom or expecting the worst. It was a deliberate exercise in gratitude, a way to wake up to the ordinary miracles we sleepwalk past every day. Seneca put it bluntly: he robs present ills of their power who has perceived their coming in advance. In other words, by imagining the absence of what we hold dear, we sharpen our appreciation for its presence. Think of it like this: when you're sick, you suddenly notice how precious it is to breathe freely. When it rains for days, you miss sunlight like an old friend. Negative visualization is simply extending that awareness before loss strikes, not to fear its arrival, but to savor what's here now. Picture walking through your home and asking, "What if this were gone tomorrow?" Not to invite anxiety, but to highlight the quiet gifts you've stopped seeing: the warmth of your bed, the laughter of your kids in the next room, even the hum of the refrigerator that means you have food. This practice reveals a profound truth. Gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a skill honed through conscious attention. Seneca wrote letters to his friend Lucilius, urging him to live as if this moment were both your first and your last. That's the heart of negative visualization: holding life lightly enough to appreciate it, but not so tightly that you strangle the joy from it. Now, let's distinguish this from pessimism. A pessimist fears loss, a Stoic prepares for it to deepen presence. Imagine two gardeners. One obsesses over the storm that might destroy his roses, paralyzed by worry. The other tends his blooms, knowing they're fleeting, which makes their colors richer, their scent sweeter. That's the difference. The Stoics weren't training to suffer, they were training to see. Here's a challenge: pick one mundane thing you rely on daily. Your morning coffee, the bus driver's nod, the way your dog greets you. Now close your eyes and picture a day without it. Really feel that absence. When you open your eyes, notice how that ordinary moment shimmers with new significance. That's negative visualization at work, not as a dark cloud, but as a spotlight revealing what's always been there. The irony: this practice doesn't make life feel fragile, it makes it feel alive, like a traveler who finally notices the beauty of their hometown after returning from afar. You start to inhabit your days with fresh eyes. Because when you stop taking things for granted, you realize something startling. Much of what you've been chasing was already in your hands. You just needed to imagine it gone to remember how much it matters. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, once pointed to his 2 ears and single mouth with a wry smile. "Nature gave us 1 tongue but 2 ears," he observed, "so we might listen twice as much as we speak." This wasn't just wit, it was warfare strategy for the mind. The Stoics saw silence not as emptiness, but as fertile ground where true understanding grows. Think of the last explosive argument you witnessed: voices clashing like cymbals, each person waiting only for their turn to talk rather than truly hearing. Now picture the rare moment when someone stopped, breathed, and truly listened. That's when the real work began. Consider how this plays out in modern conflicts. A manager facing team discord could lecture about cooperation, or they could do what the Stoics practiced: create space for silence. When tensions flare, the simple act of pausing before responding does something radical. It lets you distinguish between the noise of emotion and the signal of truth. Epictetus trained his students to treat conversations like mining for gold, sifting through layers of words to find the valuable nuggets beneath. "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth," he echoed Zeno, "so we can listen to the essence of what's said, not just the surface." Here's where Stoic silence becomes superhuman strength. In heated moments, every cell in your body screams to react, to defend, to correct, to win. But what if victory isn't in the last word, but in the deepest understanding? Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire of competing voices, wrote in his journal, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" That question transforms dialogue. The colleague's cutting remark, maybe it stems from their own unseen pressure. The child's tantrum, often a cry for connection masked as chaos. Silence becomes the bridge between trigger and truth. History offers stunning examples. When the Roman general Scipio Africanus faced rebellion, he didn't respond with threats. He convened his troops and listened. Really listened. Soldiers expecting punishment instead found themselves heard, and their grievances dissolved like salt in warm water. Contrast this with our reflex to solve problems by talking over them. The Stoics would call that building a roof before laying the foundation. It might look complete, but it won't weather the storm, so let's make this practical. Next time tension rises, try this 3-step Stoic pause. First, physically still your tongue, literally press it to the roof of your mouth. Second, count 5 heartbeats while asking, what's the unmet need beneath these words? Third, respond only when your answer serves understanding, not ego. You'll discover what the ancient teachers knew. Silence isn't passive, it's the ultimate active listening. Like a sculptor revealing form by removing excess marble, strategic quiet reveals the shape of real solutions. Now reflect, when has silence served you better than speech? Maybe it was holding back a retort that would have escalated a fight, or offering quiet presence to someone in grief when words would have felt hollow. Those moments weren't weaknesses, they were masterclasses in Stoic restraint, because sometimes the most powerful thing we can say is nothing at all, creating space for truth to echo louder than any argument ever could. Stoic compassion might sound like an oxymoron if you've bought into the myth that these ancient philosophers were cold-hearted robots. But let's set the record straight with Seneca's letters to his grieving friend, Marcia, pages brimming with tenderness. "We should weep," he wrote, "not because our loved one is gone, but because we were blessed to have them at all." That's not detachment, that's emotional intelligence at its finest. The Stoics weren't against feeling, they were against being ruled by feeling. Think of it like the difference between a lighthouse and a ship tossed in a storm. One stands firm because it feels the waves, not in spite of them. Nowhere is this balance more vital than in caregiving, whether for ailing parents, patients, or children. Burnout doesn't happen because we care too much. It happens when we confuse compassion with self-erasure. Picture a nurse working back-to-back shifts. If she absorbs every patient's pain like a sponge, she'll collapse. But if she builds what the Stoics called prosoch, mindful attention, she can change a bandage with steady hands while keeping her heart open. Seneca modeled this when he comforted bereaved friends without drowning in their sorrow. His letters reveal a man who offered solace while safeguarding his own equilibrium, like handing someone a lantern without setting yourself on fire. So how do you help without hemorrhaging your own peace? Start with the Stoic boundary tool, the dichotomy of care. You can't control another's suffering, but you can control how you show up within it. A hospice volunteer might sit with a dying patient's fear without adopting it as her own. A teacher can address a student's struggle without tying their worth to the outcome. This isn't selfishness, it's sustainability. Epictetus, who taught Stoicism to former slaves and emperors alike, put it bluntly, if you want to help the drowning, learn to swim first. Here's the paradox. The most effective helpers are often those who guard their inner stillness. Studies on therapist resilience show that the professionals who last aren't those who feel less, but those who metabolize emotion without letting it accumulate. They're like trees in a storm, roots deep enough to bend without breaking. Marcus Aurelius, who comforted plague victims while ruling an empire, wrote, The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing, ready for the blow, yet poised to respond. That's the heart of Stoic compassion, not armored indifference, but strength that makes kindness possible. Try this reframe next time you're stretched thin. Am I carrying their burden or helping them shoulder it? The first drains you, the second empowers you both, because true compassion isn't a one-way transfusion of energy. It's the quiet assurance that you can light the way without burning out. After all, even the sturdiest bridge needs stable footings, and sometimes the most loving thing you can offer is your own unshakable presence. Epictetus once compared the mind to a gatekeeper, standing vigilant at the entrance of our thoughts. His instruction was clear: don't let the crowd of impressions stampede through unchecked. This is the discipline of assent, the Stoic practice of pausing between what happens and what we decide it means. Imagine your mind as a courtroom where every perception, news headline, or offhand comment must present its case before earning your belief. In an age where algorithms feed us outrage by the second, this ancient tool becomes revolutionary armor. Consider how this plays out with modern media. A sensational headline flashes, economy collapses. Before panic sets in, the Stoic gatekeeper steps in. Is this fact or interpretation? What's the source's motive? What data exists beyond the clickbait? Epictetus warned, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. That disturbance isn't inevitable, it's a choice we make by rubber-stamping impressions without scrutiny. The same principle applies to social media spirals, workplace gossip, even our own self-talk. Every unexamined assumption is a brick in a prison we build for ourselves. History offers a masterclass in this discipline. When Alexander the Great met the philosopher Diogenes, he found him lounging in the sun. "Ask anything you wish," said the conqueror. Diogenes didn't plead for gold or power. He simply replied, "Step aside, you're blocking my light." Where others saw the world's most powerful man, Diogenes saw a shadow. That's the power of reframing impressions, not denying reality, but choosing how to engage with it. Now bring this inward. What belief about yourself have you accepted without trial? Maybe it's "I'm bad at public speaking" after one shaky presentation, or "I'll never succeed because a venture failed." The Stoics would call these untested witnesses in your mental court hearsay, not evidence. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily, writing, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." He wasn't suggesting we ignore reality. He was urging us to interrogate it. Here's your challenge. Pick one assumption you've carried like an unquestioned law. Maybe it's money equals security, or their criticism defines me. Hold it up to Stoic cross-examination. What evidence supports this? What contradicts it? How does holding this belief serve you? Like a sculptor chiseling away excess stone to reveal the form within, you're not destroying truth, you're uncovering it. The discipline of assent doesn't promise a life without pain, but it does offer something rarer, a life without unnecessary suffering. Because when you stop mistaking impressions for verdicts, you reclaim the gavel of your own mind. So as the digital age bombards us with half-truths and emotional landmines, remember, you're not a passive receiver, you're the judge, and every impression awaits your ruling. Seneca once wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Friendship always benefits, love sometimes injures." At first glance, it sounds harsh until you realize he wasn't dismissing affection. He was drawing a line between bonds built on convenience and those forged in virtue. Picture two types of friends: one who sticks around only when you're useful, helping them network, lending your car, boosting their social status. The other, they challenge your blind spots, celebrate your growth even when it outshines theirs, and hold up a mirror to your best self. That's Stoic friendship, less about what you gain, more about who you become in each other's presence. The ancient Stoics saw transactional relationships as fragile as spun glass. They might glitter in good times but shatter under pressure. Contrast that with the ironwood tree, whose roots intertwine with others of its kind, creating an underground network where strength is shared. When Seneca said, "A friend is a second self," he meant someone who reflects your values back to you, not your bank balance or connections. Think of Epictetus, born a slave, forming friendships with Roman aristocrats not because of status, but shared pursuit of wisdom. Or Cato, whose allies stood by him not for political gain, but because his integrity was magnetic. Modern research backs this up. Studies show the most enduring friendships share three traits: mutual growth, voluntary vulnerability, and what psychologists call authentic alignment, when your core values click like puzzle pieces. That's the difference between a workout buddy who vanishes when you injure your knee and the one who adapts routines so you can heal together, or the colleague who only emails when they need favors versus the one who sends articles they think will spark your curiosity. Here's where it gets practical. Today, pick up your phone and scroll through your contacts. Notice who energizes you just by their name appearing on your screen, not because they're fun, though that matters, but because they make you want to rise. That's your Stoic friend. Now reach out with zero agenda. Maybe it's a voice note saying, "Your discipline inspires me. Tell me what you're learning lately." Or forward a quote that made you think of their journey. No ask, no transaction, just the quiet artillery of mutual growth, because true friendship, as Seneca reminds us, is the most sacred of all bonds. Not because it's perfect, but because it's the one relationship where the only currency is becoming better humans together. And in a world that often measures worth by utility, that kind of bond isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. Morning light spills across your windowsill, the world still quiet. This is where the Stoics built their first fortress of the day. Marcus Aurelius didn't just wake up, he arose, pen in hand, greeting the dawn with words that still echo. When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive. That wasn't poetic fluff, it was tactical preparation. His journal pages reveal a man who didn't wait for chaos to find him. He met it at the door, armored in ritual. Imagine starting each day not with reactive scrolling, but with this intentional pause, a moment to align before the world starts pulling. Rituals aren't about rigid schedules or performative self-care. They're deliberate pauses that carve order from chaos, like a gardener tending seedlings before the heat of noon. The Stoics knew this intimately. Seneca's evening reflections, Epictetus' dawn meditations, these weren't habits, they were hinges. The kind that swing open a day, lived on purpose rather than by accident. Modern science backs this. Studies on implementation intentions show that people with simple morning rituals, even just making their bed, report higher resilience throughout the day. It's not about the act itself, but the message it sends. I am the author of this day. Marcus' gratitude practice offers a blueprint. Before sleep, he'd revisit the day not to tally wins and losses, but to excavate lessons. What did I do wrong? He'd ask, not to self-flagellate, but to course correct. What did I do right to reinforce strength? What remains unfinished? To honor growth still in motion, this three-question audit transforms ordinary nights into masterclasses in self-awareness. Picture applying this tonight. Maybe you snapped at a coworker instead of guilt spiraling. You note, tomorrow I'll pause before reacting. Or you finally set a boundary, you bookmark that courage as fuel for next time. Here's the secret most miss. Rituals needn't be elaborate to be transformative. A barista might savor her first sip of coffee, mentally dedicating the day to kindness. a student could trace 3 deep breaths before opening a textbook, anchoring focus. Even commuters can repurpose red lights as reminders. This too is part of the journey. The power lies in consistency, not complexity. Like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog, these small repetitions orient us when storms hit. So consider this: what tiny ritual could become your daily anchor? Maybe it's writing 1 sentence of gratitude before breakfast, or reviewing 3 victories, no matter how small, before bed. The key is choosing something that resonates deeply enough to outlast motivation's fickle tides, because when everything else feels unstable, ritual is the handrail you've already bolted in place. Not to control life's turbulence, but to steady yourself within it. The Stoics didn't wait for calm seas to practice navigation. They drilled in the harbor so they'd be ready when the waves came. Your morning and evening rituals are that harbor. There where you rehearse the person you're becoming, 1 intentional pause at a time. So tonight, as the day winds down, ask yourself not just what happened, but what it's preparing you to handle tomorrow. That's how ordinary moments become the foundation of unshakable strength. Demosthenes, the legendary Greek orator, was born with every disadvantage: a frail body, a stammer that made crowds laugh, and a voice so weak it barely carried past the first row. Most would have seen these as career-ending flaws for someone dreaming of public speaking, but Demosthenes did something radical. He turned each weakness into a training ground. To strengthen his voice, he practiced reciting verses with pebbles in his mouth. To steady his breath, he ran up hills while delivering speeches. To drown out distractions, he rehearsed by the roaring sea. The same crowds that once mocked him later stood spellbound as his words shaped history. That's the essence of the Stoic art of turning the obstacle, not just overcoming barriers but weaponizing them. Marcus Aurelius put it bluntly: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Notice he didn't say despite the obstacle, but because of it. This is the antifragile mindset, where hardships don't merely leave you unbroken, they leave you stronger than before. Picture a blacksmith's blade. The steel isn't weakened by the hammer and fire, it's forged by them. Modern psychology confirms this. Studies on post-traumatic growth show that people who consciously reframe adversity often develop deeper resilience, sharper purpose, and even greater compassion. The obstacle, it turns out, isn't the enemy of progress, it's the curriculum. So how do we practice this alchemy in daily life? Start by interrogating your frustrations. That coworker who micromanages, they're teaching you patience and clarity in communication. The project that failed, it's revealing gaps in your preparation or flexibility. Even physical pain can become a masterclass in presence, every twinge a reminder to appreciate days of ease. The Stoics called this ascesis, deliberately using resistance as training. Like a sailor who learns navigation by reading stormy skies, you stop cursing the winds and start harnessing them. Let's make this tangible. Grab a notebook and list 3 current obstacles. Then for each, answer: what muscle is this challenge forcing me to develop? A demanding client might be strengthening your negotiation skills. A financial setback could be refining your creativity with limited resources. Even loneliness might be carving out space for deeper self-reflection. The key shift isn't positive thinking, it's productive thinking. As Epictetus, who transformed his enslavement into wisdom, advised, don't explain the philosophy, embody it. Now here's your challenge. Pick 1 obstacle this week and invert it. If traffic frays your nerves, use red lights as prompts to practice mindful breathing. If a criticism stings, mine it for 1 actionable insight before discarding the rest. Like Demosthenes with his pebbles, ask not, why this, but what's here to master. Because the secret the Stoics knew and modern science now proves is that the difference between a stumbling block and a stepping stone isn't the obstacle itself. It's the angle at which you choose to meet it. You might not picture Stoics as the life of the party, but Seneca, the same philosopher who wrote about enduring adversity, had a surprising piece of advice. It's more fitting for a man to laugh at life than to lament it. This wasn't just casual observation, it was tactical wisdom. The Stoics saw humor not as escapism, but as a crowbar for prying open new perspectives. When life pins you down, laughter doesn't deny the weight. It reminds you that you're still free to choose how you carry it. Take modern comedians like Tig Notaro, who turned her cancer diagnosis into a groundbreaking stand-up special. On stage just days after her diagnosis, she didn't sugarcoat the terror. She met it with wit. "Good evening, hello, I have cancer, how are you?" That jarring opener did something remarkable. It let the audience exhale. By laughing with her at the absurdity of mortality, they weren't minimizing her pain. They were joining her in holding it up to the light. That's Stoic humor in action. Not making light of darkness, but finding sparks within it. The ancient teachers understood something neuroscience now confirms. Laughter physically disrupts stress cycles. When you chuckle at a setback, even darkly, you're not surrendering to it. You're momentarily stepping outside it. Marcus Aurelius, who faced plague and war, wrote, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing. But even wrestlers know the match goes better when you can shake your head and grin after a takedown." Think of the last time a well-timed joke diffused a tense moment. Maybe it was during a family argument when someone's absurd impression cut through the tension, or at work when a colleague's sarcastic quip about a missed deadline made the whole team relax into solutions. Those weren't distractions from the problem, they were recalibrations, like a sailor adjusting sails to shifting winds. Humor lets you change your relationship to hardship without denying its existence. So here's your challenge. Recall a recent frustration, a delayed flight, a broken appliance, a petty conflict. Now ask, what's the almost funny side? Not to trivialize it, but to triangulate it from a fresh angle. The Stoics weren't suggesting we turn life into a stand-up routine. They were reminding us that sometimes the quickest way to regain footing is to laugh at how hard we're trying not to slip. Because resilience isn't just about bearing weight, it's about remembering you're more than the burden you carry. The Stoics didn't just build their inner fortress on random principles, they anchored it to 4 unshakable virtues: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Think of these as the cornerstones of a temple, each supporting the others, each essential to the structure's integrity. Wisdom isn't just about knowing facts, it's about seeing the world clearly, discerning what's within your control and what isn't. Picture a modern professional sifting through a flood of emails, notifications, and opinions. The Stoic question isn't, "How do I keep up?" but "What deserves my attention?" That's wisdom in action, filtering noise from signal, choosing focus over frenzy. Courage often gets mislabeled as the absence of fear. The Stoics knew better. To them, courage was fear standing firm in uncertainty. Whether that's leaving a toxic job, having an uncomfortable conversation, or starting over after failure. Imagine a single parent returning to school midlife, juggling deadlines and bedtime stories. Every exhausted late-night study session is Stoic courage embodied, not because the doubt vanishes, but because the commitment outweighs it. As Cleans taught, virtues are linked like a chain. You can't possess one fully without the others. Courage without wisdom is recklessness. Wisdom without courage is paralysis. Then there's justice, not just courtroom fairness, but the daily choice to treat others as ends in themselves, not means to your goals. In a world of transactional relationships, this virtue becomes revolutionary. Consider the manager who allocates credit to her team rather than hoarding accolades, or the neighbor who advocates for a marginalized voice at the community meeting. Justice to the Stoics was the glue of society. Marcus Aurelius called it the source of all other virtues, because without it, strength becomes tyranny and wisdom becomes manipulation. Temperance might sound like deprivation, but it's really the art of enough. It's the difference between scrolling mindlessly for hours and choosing to disconnect, between indulging a grudge and releasing it for your own peace. Picture someone turning down a lucrative offer that conflicts with their values or setting boundaries with a demanding friend. Temperance isn't saying no to joy, it's saying yes to the right joys in the right measure. Now here's the challenge. Which of these four needs strengthening in your life right now? Maybe it's wisdom pausing before reacting to inflammatory news. Or courage finally having that overdue conversation. Perhaps justice speaking up when you'd rather stay quiet, or temperance resisting the urge to numb stress with distractions. Pick one, then, like a blacksmith tempering steel, work it deliberately, because the fortress isn't built in a day, but every virtuous act lays another stone. Seneca, the philosopher who navigated the turbulent courts of Nero, understood something modern science now confirms: the quality of your sleep shapes the strength of your waking life. His nightly ritual wasn't just about resting the body, it was a deliberate training ground for resilience. Picture this: after a day of political intrigue and intellectual demands, he'd retreat to his chamber not with a scroll of mindless distraction, but with a stylus and wax tablet. There, under flickering lamplight, he'd perform what he called his evening audit, a practice far removed from our modern habit of numbing ourselves with screens until consciousness slips away. His method was disarmingly simple yet profound. First, he'd mentally walk backward through his day like a scribe reviewing a ledger. Not to tally wins and losses, but to trace the fingerprints of his choices. Where did I act with virtue? Where did fear steer me off course? Then came the pivotal question: what did I learn today? Not what he'd accomplished or acquired, but what insight had taken root. Maybe it was noticing how a moment of patience diffused a colleague's anger, or how resisting gossip left his mind lighter. These weren't grand revelations, they were subtle calibrations, the kind that compound over time into unshakable character. Modern research validates this ancient wisdom. Studies on sleep and resilience show that the brain doesn't simply shut off at night. It sifts through the day's experiences, consolidating memories and pruning neural clutter. When Seneca deliberately curated what entered his mind before sleep, he wasn't just practicing self-reflection. He was programming his subconscious to reinforce wisdom rather than worry. Contrast this with our typical pre-sleep routine, doom-scrolling through news feeds or replaying conflicts on mental loops. The Stoics would call that pouring poison into your own well and wondering why you wake up thirsty. Here's how to adapt this practice tonight. Set aside just 5 minutes before bed, no journal required, though pen and paper deepen the effect. Ask yourself Seneca's trio of questions. What tested me today? How did I meet that test? What's one small way I grew through it? Then add a fourth, forward-looking question. How will tonight's rest fuel tomorrow's resolve? This last piece is crucial. When you view sleep not as passive recovery but as active preparation, you transform it from a biological necessity to a strategic advantage. Think of an athlete preparing for competition. They don't just collapse into bed exhausted, they hydrate, stretch, maybe visualize success. Your mind deserves the same intentional care. That difficult conversation looming tomorrow, sleeping with clarity about today's small victories, primes you to face it with steadier hands, the creative problem nagging at you. Research shows sleep catalyzes insight, but only if you've given your brain thoughtful material to work with. The Stoic sleep ritual reveals a counterintuitive truth. Resilience isn't just built through what you withstand while awake, but through how you recover while at rest. Like a blacksmith cooling tempered steel between hammer blows, these quiet hours of integration are where strength becomes sustainable. So tonight, before you surrender to sleep, ask not just what you're leaving behind in the day, but what you're carrying forward into the night's hidden workshop. Your tomorrow's self will wake not just refreshed but forged. Epictetus once compared a well-lived life to a ship's voyage, not racing recklessly with the wind, nor stubbornly anchoring against every wave, but trimming the sails to navigate the currents with steady purpose. That image holds a profound truth. Resilience isn't found in emotional extremes, but in the disciplined middle path. The Stoics weren't preaching emotional numbness, they were mapping the art of measured response. Imagine a captain facing a storm. Panic might urge her to abandon ship, while denial might tempt her to ignore the gathering clouds. Wisdom, though, it's the hand adjusting the rudder, feeling the storm's fury without being ruled by it. This middle path reveals itself in everyday moments. Take anger, a natural fire that, when controlled, forges resolve, but when unchecked, burns bridges. The Stoic approach isn't to smother the flame, but to bank it. Epictetus put it plainly: any person capable of angering you becomes your master, his solution. The pause between spark and blaze. Picture a colleague taking credit for your idea. The knee-jerk reaction might be a public confrontation or silent resentment. The middle path, a private conversation that names the issue without igniting conflict. It's not about suppressing emotion, it's about channeling it. Now consider the opposite extreme: apathy. The modern world often mistakes Stoicism for emotional withdrawal, as if building an inner fortress means bricking up the windows. But Marcus Aurelius, who journaled openly about his grief and weariness, would disagree. His writings show a man deeply engaged with life's joys and sorrows, yet never drowned by them. The middle path here isn't indifference, it's selective engagement. Like a gardener who tends to some plants while pruning others, you choose where to invest your emotional energy. Here's the litmus test: where in your life are you swinging between extremes unnecessarily? Maybe it's workaholism versus procrastination, people-pleasing versus isolation, or even self-criticism versus complacency. The ship analogy reminds us veer too far in either direction, and you risk capsizing. A student cramming all night before exams knows the crash of burnout, just as the one who avoids studying altogether faces the shock of failure. The middle path, consistent, deliberate effort adjusting the sails as conditions change. The brilliance of this balance is that it's not static. A ship's crew doesn't set a course and walk away. They're constantly sensing shifts in wind and tide. Similarly, emotional equilibrium requires regular check-ins. Seneca described it as the art of steering the soul, not toward some unattainable perfection, but toward a dynamic stability. When grief comes, you let it flow like waves around a pier, neither dammed up nor sweeping you out to sea. When joy arrives, you savor it without clinging, like sunlight on water. So try this today. Identify one area where you've been oscillating between extremes. Maybe it's your response to criticism, either lashing out or shrinking away. Or your relationship with productivity, alternating between marathon sprints and guilty stagnation. Now, imagine applying Epictetus' nautical wisdom. What would a steady course look like here? Not the absence of waves, but the skill to ride them. Because the goal isn't to eliminate life's storms, it's to become the kind of captain who knows they're survivable. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who was exiled multiple times for his principles, once said something that cuts through the noise of our modern lives. What's the use of building elaborate houses if we fail to build a life worth living within them? That question lingers like smoke from an ancient fire, simple, persistent, impossible to ignore. The Stoics weren't concerned with monuments or marble statues. They measured legacy in the quiet consistency of daily choices. Picture a mason laying bricks. Alone, each one seems insignificant, but stacked with intention over time, they become a fortress that outlasts storms. That's the essence of Stoic legacy, not grand gestures, but the cumulative weight of how you show up when no one's applauding. Consider the humble olive tree. Some in the Mediterranean have stood for over 2,000 years. They don't grow overnight. Their gnarled trunks tell stories of seasons endured, droughts survived, branches pruned back to flourish again. Our lives are no different. That patient conversation with a struggling coworker, the extra moment to really listen to your child's silly story, the choice to walk away from gossip rather than spread it, these are the rings in your personal tree. They may not make headlines, but they shape the grain of who you're becoming. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire, wrote his most enduring words not on triumphal arches, but in private journals never meant for publication. His legacy wasn't in the battles won, but in the battles fought within himself each dawn. Here's where Stoic wisdom collides beautifully with modern science. Researchers studying butterfly effects in social systems found that small, consistent acts of integrity, like a manager admitting mistakes or a neighbor returning lost items, create ripple effects far beyond their initial scope. It's as if every ethical choice emits a frequency that subtly tunes the moral compasses of those around us. Rufus understood this when he taught that living meaningfully isn't about dramatic heroics, but about the disciplined repetition of the ordinary. That barrister who remembers your order, the teacher who stays late to explain a concept one more time, these are the unsung architects of human connection, building cathedrals of kindness one stone at a time. Let's make this tangible. Right now, think of someone whose small act changed your trajectory. Maybe it was the librarian who recommended just the right book at a pivotal moment, or the stranger who helped you change a tire in the rain. Their actions likely took mere minutes, yet here you are, years later, still warmed by the embers of their decency. That's the power you hold in your own hands today. Not to craft some grandiose epitaph, but to be the quiet hero in someone else's untold story. So as the sun sets on this discussion, carry forward one question like a lantern. What seemingly insignificant choice today could ripple beyond your sight? Perhaps it's withholding a cutting remark that would have festered in someone's mind, or finally starting that project you've delayed, not because it'll make you famous, but because it'll make you proud. The Stoics remind us that eternity isn't some distant realm. It's the space we create between moments, the invisible threads we weave into the tapestry of now. Your legacy isn't waiting at some finish line, it's being written in the ink of today's ordinary, extraordinary decisions. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius had a peculiar nightly ritual. He didn't merely collapse into bed after ruling an empire. Instead, he'd take up his journal and conduct what Stoics called anachrysis, a rigorous self-examination. Imagine the most powerful man in the ancient world, candlelight flickering across parchment, asking himself not about conquests or politics, but three disarmingly simple questions. Where did I stray from my principles today? Where did I hold firm? What will I do differently tomorrow? This wasn't self-punishment. It was the whetstone he used to sharpen his character nightly. Here's why this practice remains revolutionary 20 centuries later. Our brains are wired to fixate on failures or inflate successes, rarely pausing to extract wisdom from either. The Stoic daily review cuts through that noise like a surgeon's scalpel. Picture a blacksmith inspecting his tools after a day's work, not to lament their dents, but to maintain their edge. Your mind deserves the same care. Start with the first question: what went well? This isn't about tallying achievements, it's about spotting alignment with your values. Maybe you paused before reacting to a provocation, or chose integrity over convenience in a small but significant choice. These moments, often overlooked, are the bricks of your inner fortress. Now the pivot: what could improve? The Stoics approach this with clinical detachment, like a gardener noting which plants need pruning. Perhaps you snapped at a loved one when stressed, or procrastinated on a meaningful project. The key is framing these not as indictments, but as waypoints for course correction. Epictetus, who trained students in this very practice, warned against self-flagellation. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. In other words, the goal isn't guilt, it's growth. The crown jewel of the review is the virtue audit. Did I act with wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance? These 4 Stoic pillars transform abstract ideals into daily metrics. Wisdom might mean recognizing when your frustration was really hunger or fatigue. Courage could appear in speaking truth despite social risk. Justice shines through small acts like giving full attention to someone others ignore. Temperance. That's the discipline to walk away from pointless arguments or excessive indulgence. Consistency here outweighs perfection. Seneca compared this practice to tending a garden. Some days you plant, some days you weed, but you show up daily. Modern psychology validates this. Studies on habit formation show that regular reflection strengthens neural pathways for self-regulation. Think of a musician reviewing each performance to refine the next. Your life deserves the same deliberate practice. So tonight, before sleep claims you, grab any scrap of paper or even your phone's notes app. Spend 3 minutes with these questions. No grand prose, just honest bullet points. Over weeks, patterns emerge like constellations. Perhaps patience falters when you skip meals, or courage blooms when you prepare thoroughly. That's the magic of the Stoic review. It doesn't just measure progress, it manufactures it. Like Marcus in his lamplit study, you're not just ending a day. You're architecting the next. We've traveled far together, from the foundations of your inner fortress to the heights where strength and empathy intertwine like ancient vines. Picture that fortress now, not as a solitary castle on a hill, but as a living structure with deep roots and open gates. Its walls aren't made of cold stone, but of the daily practices we've explored. The pause between stimulus and response, the reflection that turns obstacles into fuel, the deliberate choice to act from virtue rather than impulse. This is where resilience meets humanity, where your unshakable core becomes the platform from which you engage the world, not retreat from it. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who guided us throughout this journey, left a final clue to this balance. He wrote, "What injures the hive injures the bee." In those 6 words, he captured the essence of Stoic wisdom. That true strength is never selfish. Your inner fortress isn't complete until its drawbridge lowers, until its strength shelters others too. Think of the oak tree that withstands storms while providing shade, or the lighthouse that stands firm precisely to guide those in turbulent waters. Your resolve matters most when it becomes the foundation for kindness. So where do you begin tomorrow? Maybe it's the 10-second pause before reacting to a provocation, creating space for clarity. Perhaps it's the nightly journaling that transforms chaos into lessons, or the morning ritual that sets your compass toward virtue. It could be as simple as asking in moments of tension, "How can I hold my ground without hardening my heart?" The practices are tools, but you're the craftsman. Each day another chance to shape the life you want to live. As we close, I'll leave you with one final question, not from me, but from your future self. A year from now, looking back at the person you are today, Which choice will they be most grateful you started making? The answer is your compass. Share it in the comments if you feel called, not just your insights, but the small steps you're taking to build resilience without losing tenderness. Because the most powerful transformations often begin as whispers, not earthquakes. Your inner fortress isn't built in a day, but every intentional stone laid today becomes the unshakable ground you'll stand on tomorrow.